All right, NFL fans, welcome to another episode of the Call Sheet Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Smith. This is a Thursday show. And as we broadcast today, we are 1 week from the NFL draft. It feels like the buildup takes forever, and then boom, it's here. And I have a great guest to talk about it all with me. Returning to the show, he was here a couple weeks ago to talk about his career as an NFL scout. And today we're going to dive into the upcoming draft with Rodrik David. Welcome back, Rodrik.
Yeah, thanks. Great to be here. 1 week away. Like you said, he cannot get here soon enough. There's a lot of work, a lot of stuff goes on to get to it. And man, I'm just ready for it.
Yeah, I'm sure Rodrik has been extremely busy. He was a longtime NFL scout, did work for the Falcons, also for the Carolina Panthers. Rodrik, when he was on the show a couple of weeks ago, we talked about advanced scouting. What does that entail? But Rodrik, you were also scouting college prospects. So let's start with this question. What did you look for in their tape when you were evaluating them for the draft or potentially as an undrafted free agent?
Yeah. I mean, the number one thing that, again, you've got your trait sheet. It's always about drafting and evaluating traits. Again, you can see good football players, production numbers are easy to see on paper, guys that are playing at big schools. But at the end of the day, every prospect, you're looking at traits. How explosive? How well can he change directions? Can an offensive lineman open his hips and work an outside zone? Is he a downhill gap scheme guy? Is he a one gap guy, two gap guy? What's his lateral leverage? Again, you go through every position on the board and you've got your trait list, and that is what you're evaluating. And the guys with the best traits are usually going to move themselves up the board. And that's why, guys like Shemar Stewart in this year's draft, again, he's got very good to excellent level traits. The production doesn't match, but again, the traits say he should play in the NFL, and he's going to go, if not in the first round, he's going to go, he could go as early as the top 10. I expect him to be a first round pick. So scouts are always looking at traits, number one off film, and that's going to be really your driving force in every conversation you have.
I would imagine you have to be careful with a prospect like that, where you kind of fall in love with the measurables and with the workout stuff. And then, how serious is that conversation about those two things not matching up? What's happening in the workouts versus what was happening in the actual game film?
Yeah, again, it is a tough and lively conversation when those guys come up. Is if he couldn't get to the quarterback and finish in college, what makes you think he's going to be able to do it at the next level? Again, this is the Trayvon Walker question from a couple years ago, and you start talking, well, they asked him to do this and that. And again, I've always been on the side of, hey, if a college coach thinks you can go get 10 to 12 sacks, he's going to tell you to do that, not have you. No, I'm going to be rigid and have you play out of position. So again, you get your different philosophies, and hey, the traits are always going to work. You get your head coaches, your coordinators that are like, no, I have the secret sauce. I've worked with these kinds of guys. Again, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. Trayvon Walker is a perfect example because, again, you got the Trayvon and Shemar Stewart comparison. It's taken some time. Trayvon looks like he's kind of maybe getting over a little bit of that hump. Again, you look at background, how long has he played football, how long has he played the position. Again, a little bit of everything goes into it, as well as character. Again, what kind of kid is he? Has he put in the work? Has he spent the time away from the facility, away from the football field? Is he just an athlete, or is he a football player that just happens to be an exceptional athlete? So they're really fun conversations on guys like that. And you want to see the production, and you find ways. Again, you can make the numbers do a lot of different things, but at the end of the day, again, you go back to the film and put it all together, to put the big puzzle together for Thursday at draft night.
How much is scheme fit a consideration? Do you think, or in your experience, were conversations often around, is this guy going to translate into our scheme, into what we do? Were they more centered on, hey, is he athletic enough, or is he versatile enough to be able to fit into multiple schemes? Is that a major consideration?
Yeah. Beyond round one, yes, this scheme question gets definitely more important. Again, if you're going in the first round, you're probably going to be a pretty scheme versatile player. Again, you've got your excellent level athletes. You get your very good level athletes who, again, at the end of the day, you plug them into whatever system. They're that good a football player that they're going to be able to fit. Now, as you get through the first round, again, that's where you start seeing, probably mid-teens. Hey, this group of teams that happens to be an outside zone, happens to be more gap, happens to be a little bit more 3-4, they're going to have a higher grade on some of these players. Not that the non-scheme fits don't think he's a first rounder, but they're just going to rank him. His grade for that team is going to be a little bit lower. As you get into the second, third round, day 3 especially, scheme fit absolutely matters, because again, a guy that really struggles in a gap scheme, getting downhill, create movement, could be a perfect fit for an inside zone, outside zone movement based system on the offensive line, for example. Again, a zone coverage team as opposed to a man coverage team, a 2 high, single high. Again, you get through all the different schemes, and again, scheme fit really, really matters for those guys as you get through the draft, because there's a reason they're probably stronger in some traits that fit with that scheme as opposed to others.
That's interesting, right? That the guys at the top of the draft are elite enough to transcend scheme in a way. Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so tell me this. Speaking of the guys at the top of the draft, what's a can't miss guy look like? What's a can't miss prospect look like? And how do those guys leap out versus some of those players that are going to be taken further down?
Yeah, can't miss is a tough one, because again, I think every player taking the first round, a team feels like, hey, this is a guy. This is a guy that's going to be really good for us. Again, that's why they're taking him. Again, the term can't miss isn't used. What we think about as scouts is like, this guy's just a clean prospect. Again, the character is among the top grades. His athleticism is among the top grades. The production matches. Hey, his medical is clean, and he is a really good football player. When everything checks out and it's like, man, we just don't really have many questions on this guy. Again, it becomes a pretty easy evaluation, and then it just kind of comes down to, hey, is this a guy we want to take with this pick? Again, I was in Atlanta when we drafted Kyle Pitts, and that was the case for Kyle Pitts. He was a rare level athlete that was at an offensive position, outstanding character athlete. The medical was clean. He had, I think, a concussion, got hit on a crossing route. Again, everything was clear on that. Again, there were really no concerns. Again, disappointing career so far in Atlanta. I think everybody knows that. But the prospect, the player, there was nothing that it was like, hey, we're sitting there on draft day, like really like, can we do it with this player? Again, a guy like Keanu Neal back in the 2016 draft, who just recently retired, he was that way. Elite character, was a perfect scheme fit. Medical was clear. And again, on the field, he was a really good player. So both those guys were like, hey, yeah, give us a reason not to draft them. And it became hard. You almost have to have just a black hat in the room that says, hey, just for argument's sake, what about this? And Trevor Lawrence, again, was that way as well. We were not in on quarterback the year Trevor got drafted, but again, there's no reason not to draft Trevor. And again, so you get some of those guys who everything checks out clean, and they become, those quote unquote can't miss prospects.
It's interesting when you started to answer that question, you listed character first. And I know you weren't necessarily going in order, but you mentioned character first, and then medical, and then the film. Obviously, the film is the thing that will probably attract you to those guys first and foremost. But how much do those other factors matter? I'm not asking for names, but have you ruled guys out as a scout or as an organization because of the extenuating circumstances, not necessarily the film?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No question. Again, the film is going to be the first thing you're doing as a scout. Before you even go out in a fall season, you've got at least 2 to 3 games watched on a player. And again, you fall in love with some of these guys. And then you get to the building and you start to do your character work. Again, the medical thing's a little bit different because, again, you try to get some notes. You try to find out what their medical, rehab, prehab habits are. But again, a lot of times you leave that to people that actually, went to school for it, athletic trainers, doctors, all that kind of stuff. That character piece is such a huge one because again, you fall in love with some of these guys. And then all of a sudden, I've been in situations where, again, when you evaluate the traits, you see what the traits are, you try to project the traits, but the character is what really allows you to see where the traits could end up. A player's only going to get as good as probably his character allows him to. In Atlanta, under our former GM, Thomas Dimitroff, who I spent most of my time with, there was a large section of guys who, if they had enough character concerns, they were not going to be in consideration for us. And there were a number of good players from that standpoint that ended up over in that pile. And, it's tough because as a scout, you try to find reasons to like guys and find reasons why, hey, no, this guy, if he comes to Atlanta, if he comes to Tennessee, if he comes to wherever, he's going to be able to make it for us. And that's where the talent level for the organization, it becomes not a question of how bad is this character or what character issues does he have. Is, as an organization, what do we have to do to manage these character concerns, the family, the off-field, whatever habits they have. Some organizations, we know them, Cleveland, Kansas City does really well, Baltimore, Dallas, they do really well managing some of those personalities and getting a lot out of those football players. In Atlanta, under Thomas, we traditionally didn't. We struggled with those guys. Again, a guy like Tack McKinley, who we took in the first round. Again, his off-field questions were fairly obvious. We thought we could help manage those to get him to be a really good player. And a number of things led to Tack eventually, going elsewhere and possibly being out of the league at this point now as he's kind of bounced around practice squads. But some of those players, no matter the talent level, they end up in hey, we just can't bring him here to our organization.
It's fascinating how much is involved in all of this process. I think people are quick to simply ask the question, is this guy a good football player? But that is really obviously only part of the equation. And where it's really tricky is quarterback. Oh, yeah. And you mentioned Trevor Lawrence. He's gotten a second contract, or he got a big extension. But I read an article recently that said since 2013, only about 40-some%, I think it was like 46, 47% of the quarterbacks taken in the first round have gone on to get second contracts or become what we would call franchise quarterbacks. And that number kind of shocked me because, again, your first round is supposed to be you don't want to say can't miss, but your more safer picks, et cetera. Yeah. Why do you think quarterback has been so difficult to evaluate in terms of whether their college film will translate to the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing you have to the hardest position to play in all of sports. So again, you talk about a level of difficulty that's just hard to overstate how much is put on a quarterback's plate to operate. So again, the percentages and stuff, I mean, it's really difficult. Beyond that, again, there is more nuance to the way the game is played at quarterback. How much are they asked to do? How much are they asked to process? How much are they how much is put on their plate from the coaching staff and through the process for quarterbacks, like many players, but quarterback is just, again, amplified to another level, is getting the real honest answers. Again, if there's a potential first round quarterback, the team is going to be in lockstep. The college team is going to be in lockstep. And hey, this is going to be, we'll call it the narrative. He had to read full field. Well, the film looks like he's only reading half field. But again, the coaching staff, no, he had full field reads. He could make checks and calls. And it's like, I don't know if the film matches that. But you hear a quarterback coach, an OC, hey, they're selling their guy. Again, it's hard as a scout to hold that against them. You have to, that's where the really good scouts can read between the lines and, again, hear the answers within the answers and find a QC coach or find somebody else in the building who maybe heard something one time, and again, allows you to ask another question. And it is, again, when you're evaluating the hardest position in sports and having to glean through all the information that is maybe or maybe not accurate. Again, it is just a tough position to evaluate. And again, as we've seen, teams have been quicker to move on from head coaches, GMs, and quarterbacks are kind of included in that. Is the time to develop. If you're a first round quarterback, you're basically going to be expected to start from day one, which again, I think there's plenty of track record to show going the opposite way is maybe better. Jaden Daniels is going to, push back on that narrative this year. But again, that's where you go to a Cliff Kingsbury. What was Cliff asking him to do this year? And just all those questions. So it's an incredibly difficult position. It's, there's no two guys that throw the football the exact same. There's no two offenses that operate the exact same way. So there's just a ton of nuance and everything that goes into it.
It's funny. I kind of laughed to myself when you were talking about coaches selling their players, because I was a head coach for a high school program for 14 years. I met with a lot of college recruiters who are coming in, and there's a dilemma that you face because you want the best for your kids, especially when they have, let's say, every once in a while you got a dad who's trying to push his kid to maybe a higher level than he should be. Hey, he's not a D1 kid, but dad wants that experience for his son, et cetera. But at the same time, it's your reputation as a coach. I don't want to sell a college recruiter on a kid who can't play there, because now my word's not really worth much. So that's probably a fine line you had to walk as a scout.
Yeah. And again, that's where I say the good scouts and good coaches, again, they know the deal as well. The good pro liaisons, the good personnel guys that talk to scouts, they will give you answers without saying it out loud. And again, it's not just the evaluation or the information they're giving you, it's how they give it to you, in what order, what emphasis. And again, that is where the art of being able to sit here and look you in the eyes, and when the eyes get a little bit big, or the body language, or what you're not telling me, the way you're avoiding this question is giving me all the answer I need. And again, that's where the good scouts really, really excel. And again, I've been around the guys who just, write that everything down. Matter of fact, hey, I heard him say it. Now I'm good to go. And then it's like, hey, I'm gonna have to circle back on this one. Again, I'm not going to put this coach on the spot with the 5 other scouts. I may give him a phone call a little bit later. I might try to get him one-on-one and be like, all right, coach, I heard the non-answer here. Like, what's the real deal? And again, they may give you a little bit more. They may be like, hey, you're on the right track. That was always one. They weren't going to say it, but they were going to, hey, you're on the right track in that area. That's all I'm going to say. It's like, okay, I'm affirming that, again, my suspicions are correct here.
Got to be a little bit of a psychologist, I suppose.
100%. And it's an interesting way to get answers.
Right. All right. Hey, let's talk about this year's draft. You've obviously spent a good amount of time scouting guys and looking at the big board, so to speak. Who are some guys that you like? Just you can just throw out some names of guys that you, if you're scouting for these NFL teams right now, you'd be excited about these guys.
Man, there's a bunch of them that are really fun players. Again, you start at the top of the draft, and again, Abdul Carter is as fun of player to watch as and about anybody. I love, if I could just watch one position all the time, it would be D-line. I prefer insides. I prefer the bigs. Again, big, nasty game. Again, I'm a little, 5'8", 170 pound, white guy that always wanted to be a big D lineman. Like that was the dream, right? Yeah. And that was never going to happen. I love watching the bigs. I love watching D-line, watching what Abdul Carter does, the way his traits work on the edge. Again, there were times where he just took over games, just running by guys. Again, through the process, again, more and more you hear about him. Really, again, one of those guys where it's like, hey, yeah, he answers all the questions. He does have the medical that he seems to be just checking every box through the process. But again, is one of those guys where, man, if I'm sitting there at 1, I know who my pick is with the way the quarterback group is this year. Abdul Carter is that kind of guy.
Let me ask you real quick about Abdul Carter, the medical. A guy like that, you look at his film and you're like, damn, I want this. I want to draft this guy. Can you allow your desire for what he looks like on film to, in a way, cloud your objectivity as to whether or not that medical is really going to set him back? I mean, can you be so excited about a prospect that you almost, I don't want to say deceive yourself, but talk yourself into it? Should you be more concerned about the medical?
Yeah. And again, that's where the good scouts, good front offices, good personnel departments, they note the medical, but again, I am going to trust and listen to my doctors. And that is where it becomes really difficult, especially for GMs, is they've heard medical over different years. You may be getting a second opinion. Your team doc, if he says, yeah, the shoulders, this is going to be the process. He's going to be cleared here. We're going to ask him to do this. We're going to ask him to put a harness on this here. Long term, do we have any long-term concerns? Is there anything in the future that I'm worried about? If that team doctor comes back and says, I don't have concerns, he's going to be a little bit limited this summer. But again, by week 1 of the regular season, when games actually matter, he's going to be 100%. I have no concerns as a doctor. Again, you rest easy. It's always one of the hardest things. Has been players where, again, we love everything about him, but the concerns are that this player is never going to make it back from this injury. Again, a guy like Jalen Smith from Notre Dame went to Dallas. Again, devastating knee injury, went from being a top 5 pick to, again, right there at the top of the second round, I think, and really a shortened career because of that, that awful injury he had. Miles Jack career probably cut short, major medical concerns on that knee for him. It is the worst thing when that doc comes in and says, hey, I have major concerns on this guy playing more than 2 years in the NFL, because that is deflating, because as a scout, you don't have any answer back for it other than, hey, their trainer said he wasn't concerned. Well, again, of course, they're pushing him. They want him to get drafted. I'm not a doctor. Scouts aren't doctors. If there are any scouts that are doctors, again, they should probably, go into the medical field. They'll make a lot more money, but it is one of those deflating things to hear when team docs and trainers, whoever it is, are like, yeah, we just, I'm really concerned about this player's medical future.
Okay. Give me, who else are you excited about?
I mean, there's some really fun players. Mason Graham, again, is another really fun player to watch on the D line. I really like Alfred Collins. He was a guy, I had a first round grade coming into this year. He's got stretches where he looks like a first round defensive tackle. He is a rare size and length guy inside. Some inconsistent film, kind of disappears at times. He's a guy that, again, it was just really fun to watch. I love that. Again, you want to talk about best at his position, Ashton Janty. Again, he is just a super fun player to watch. Again, can do everything. He is going to make somebody really happy, I think, for a long time in the NFL. He can do it. Again, the more you hear about the person as well, again, just one of those guys that you'd get excited about as a scout. Man, this is the kind of guy I want on my team. Got Tetrell McMillan, really fun to watch him play football. Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland. Again, you just got a bunch of really good football players in this class. And again, a bunch of guys that, for the most part, these guys that we're all talking about, pretty clean prospects. I'm going to go to a guy that I've actually had a chance to do some work with, probably a day 3 defensive lineman that, had got the opportunity to go to the Senior Bowl, Junior Tafuna out of Utah. And again, those day 3 guys, those are where you see the players that, hey, there was something about them from a scheme, from a trait standpoint, from the person, like they're continuing to get better. Again, Utah, with what they do, they're really a left and right defense on the defensive line. So you're going to play some nose, you're going to play some 3-tech. And so again, that's where that scheme really comes into it. You almost end up doing 2 different cut-ups, 2 different tapes where, hey, this is his nose tackle film. This is where he's going to be 2-eye, taking on 2 double teams. This is his 3-tech tape where he's getting upfield. Again, a high motor dude that gets after it, goes and plays hard. He's a guy I like, that I expect to get drafted on day 3. And again, he's one of those guys. He's not going to be super sexy. He's not going to be a 10 sack a year guy, but he's going to play 40% of your snaps. He's going to be a good football player that makes that whole group better.
I know you're a real football guy because you're so excited talking about these D linemen, and this is where the sausage gets made. But that said, before I get you out of here, I got to ask you about arguably the most polarizing player in the draft. All right, Shedeur Sanders. We've seen projections he could go as high as number 2 overall to Cleveland. We've seen people who think he might be around at like 26 when the Rams are drafted. What are your thoughts on him as a prospect? Not necessarily as a person, although I guess it all has to kind of come together, right?
It all has to, yeah. It all again. I like Shadir Sanders. Again, the argument that more and more scouts are making over the years is the quarterback scale should be different than every other position. Again, right now teams basically evaluate him with the same grade. Shadir Sanders is what you'd call a starter in the NFL. I think he's got starter level traits. He can make every throw. He can, throw with touch. He can put velocity on the ball. He's got good level traits. I'm not sure, other than maybe his toughness. Again, maybe his athleticism, very good, which you like that. You like those traits about him. Otherwise, he's a good level prospect. You can win. Again, he's got better quarterbacks than Mac Jones, who was drafted. He's got better traits than Brock Purdy, who we know what Brock Purdy is at this point. He's got, traits like other starting quarterbacks in the NFL. But again, he's probably like more of a second or third round true grade. But again, those guys are going to get pushed to the first round. What I like that Shadir Sanders has done, he elevated 2 programs. He was part of that as the focal point. Obviously, teammate Travis Hunter makes a difference too. But when you're the guy, the quarterback, again, you elevated 2 programs and put Jackson State on the map. You put CU back on the map. And again, has been subject to ridicule, to evaluation, has been under the microscope. Again, part of that by his own doing, part of that by the head coach's doing, his dad's doing, and part of that because he's a good player that, again, has put some really fun stuff on tape. Again, I think he's a good level player. I think the city fit is one of those things that really matters for me. Again, talking through Shadir, I don't think he's a Cleveland Brown. I think the Cleveland would be a bad city for him, a bad spot. I don't think that is where he wants to be. And the funny thing is, New York put him under that microscope. I think that is good for him. I think that is the environment that he would thrive in, a big market where he is once again under the microscope. He knows how to deal with the criticism. He's been doing it now for about 3 years. He can deal with all that. Good with the media. Again, a franchise that has the ownership structure in place to make sure some things are done kind of behind the scenes for him. Again, I would be super uncomfortable drafting him as a starter day one. Again, but the right city, the right organization, the right plan, the right head coach, I think matters. Again, I know all of a sudden the Pittsburgh Steelers in on him perhaps at some point down the line. That's the right kind of head coach and organization to put him with. Pittsburgh may be a tough city stretch, but again, I think the head coach covers a lot of things there. He is an interesting prospect that, again, like you said, he could go to. I think he's going to slide a little bit. I don't think he gets out of the teens at the latest. I think somebody's going to come up and grab him there. But again, he's a good prospect that I think is probably one of those guys that's gotten beat up in the media a little bit more than he deserved. But again, he's going to get paid for it eventually. So it comes with the territory.
Yeah, he's going to land on his feet. He's going to he's going to be all right. Well, it's going to be fascinating. I'm really excited for it. I know you are. Before we get out of here, tell us real quick what's going on over at your podcast.
Yeah. Again, is this one's coming out Thursday? We did a live episode with Eric at home yesterday, talking through the first round of the NFL draft, really getting into really those top 10 picks. Where again, there's going to be a ton of questions. I'm sure we'll have some draft coverage next week. Wednesday, Scouting the League comes out every week. We're on all the spots. Fans for Sports Network, of course, all the different spots you can find your podcast as well as YouTube. Again, check me out as always at Right Step ADV. All the updates there, and again, actually. Going behind the scenes on some of this stuff and talking through the process, how that sausage is made back in the draft room, because next week doesn't slow down for teams. And the really fun process that happens next week is those UDFA boards. That Saturday after round 7 happens, and that's where the area scouts really make their hay and can bring in and really supplement really good teams with good players.
Interesting. Well, as always, this was an excellent conversation. Rodrik, man, I really appreciate you coming on again.
Yeah, absolutely. Love being here. Love talking ball.
All right. Thank you. All right, man. That's our Call Sheet Daily program for Thursday. 1 week and counting for the NFL draft. All right. For Rodrik David, This has been Kevin Smith. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.